Today we are diving into something really special. It's going to be extra spooky because we are diving into Singapore horror films. Eric Khoo is one of the pioneers who revived Singapore's cinema and the creator of the home box office horror series Folklore.
And Mike Wiluan is the director, producer, and now the man behind a new horror film, OrangIkan.
See?
Okay, let's start from the beginning, all right? Eric, growing up, right? Is there any particular horror story or moment that's really stuck with you? Like, what inspired you to, tell horror films?
I think it's my mother because she just loved horror movies. So as a little boy, she would bring me and my sister at least once a week to see the 4 o'clock show of some horror film. But also my mom had a lot of stories because she did believe in, the spirits. And she always would tell me the story that there's a spirit living in the banana tree. And if you take a nail and you poke it into the tree, you tie some string to it, bring it all the way up and put it under your pillow, you'll dream of her coming to you to beg you to remove the nail. Where I lived, there was a banana tree that I often looked at, wondering if I should put a nail in it. But I was a bit scared, so I never did it. And I think, because she was so superstitious, she would always tell me also about black magic, like things that were very scary for a young child, like menstruation blood, Nazi kang, because I think in this part of the world, right, we have so many different types of superstition, right? And also if you talk about baby ghosts, like Yong Kao, Kwai Tai, Toyo, and then if you look at it in Southeast Asia, right, there are all these different types of permutations of the baby ghost, the Kwai Tai, right? Because the Vietnamese have their take on it, and they're all slightly different, because it's supposedly from an embryo, right?
Yes.
Like the Thais would basically take a dead baby, take the oil off the chin, and then put it into a little glass container. Supposedly, the Vietnamese would take an entire fetus and chop it into different pieces. You have the head, torso, arms, and legs, then put each in separate bottles. With one baby, you create various entities.
Do the parts serve different purposes?
Supposedly, it's just one of the whole thing. It's this. So then they will still do whatever you want. It's just, when you think about it, I don't know who created these stories. But sometimes, I guess in Singapore, if you talk to a lot of Malay families, they will say, yeah, Toil, they wouldn't steal my money. It's just, I remember I had this ad, a young Malay girl, and we were doing something that was paranormal, and then we just talked about Toil. She goes, yeah, there's one in my house, and he likes to steal 50 notes. So at home, right? Everybody then decides, okay, we just keep 10 notes, right? Or, when I was talking to a casino owner, they were saying that they have to put a lot of sweets outside the casino. Because these little things, they go in there, they'll play the cards, and I find it all very fascinating, and especially coming from this part of the world. It's almost like when you look at the Western world, they don't have as many different types of spirits.
It's not that scary.
Yeah, because here we've got the Pontiana, right? We've got Penangal.
Very exotic, right?
Very exotic.
We have different versions.
Because the Penangal with the head that flies around with the entrails.
If you visit the Philippines, Malaysia, or Thailand, you'll find variations of the kuntilana throughout Southeast Asia. So even if you have a Thai viewer who watches an Indonesian kuntilana, there's a recognition that they know what this is, right? And so I think there's a thematic folklore that travels across Southeast Asia. Like you said, if you go to the West has its own as well, whether it's vampires, werewolves, there are different versions, right? So I think that's where in Asia we have this kind of connectivity with all the different countries, especially like Indonesia.
Because the Kuntian, that's like a Puntiana.
Pontiana, Kundilana, Pocong, Toyo, right? So there's also the sisters and the cousins, right, of the variation, right?
So what about you, Mike? Is there any setting or a movie or even a creepy moment that planted the seeds for you to want to do horror stories?
Well, I've always been fascinated with horror from a young age because I had a similar enthusiasm when I was young, like Eric when his mother brought him to watch horror movies. My mother brought me to the theater to watch Evil Dead when I was like 8, right? And I think at that time, she really didn't know what Evil Dead was. And we went to see it. And my mom just said, "This is very silly." And I was so terrified of it and fascinated. And she kept telling me, "It's not real. It's not real."
Oh no.
And so I kind of had this fascination with it. But I grew up, I was in school in England. I always came back on holidays, and I grew up on this island, Batam, right? And, my dad was developing hotels and resorts. We were building stuff there. And at that time, there were not many people on the island. But I was always fascinated. I was kind of drawn into it because like they would find bodies buried in the, when they were digging the foundations, they found these sort of like graves. And every time they found the graves, they would have to bring in these people to find out, who are these people? And they were sort of like, I mean, these are all graves. I mean, they're not like, recent graves. But there was a history of this, and people would come and they would pray. And there were these stories, and you sit with the dukuns or the shamans. They would tell you, okay, this place is now blessed, and you kind of listen to these stories, and everyone would be so enthralled by what they said. And these bodies, once you find them, they would be reinterred. And so it kind of makes you think that, my gosh, like there is death here. There's death maybe everywhere that you go. So it was kind of like another experience. And living on the island, you would go through a village and there would be a funeral, like someone has just died and the body will be out and you'd see dead bodies. And sometimes they'll wash up on shore and, you kind of grow up with that, right? And this whole sort of connection with death, right, becomes very real, right? And also with spirits, I never was a believer in spirits. I loved watching horror movies, ghost movies, but I just never believed that they were real. But until sometimes you actually feel this, right? You actually feel something and you kind of connect it with the ether world. And so there's a connection that, aside from obviously learning more about the folklore and the interesting dynamic with so much in that folklore, there's the connection with death, right? So my interest was that connection with death. And I always sort of felt that I wasn't scared anymore. All right, I already experienced sort of ghostly encounters, dead bodies, tragic circumstances. Once you see it, you kind of get more drawn into it. It's not a morbid fascination, but you kind of get more comfortable with death, right? And so that was the interesting sort of lure into that world of horror and the supernatural, right?
I think it's really interesting how both of you are intrigued and you actually went to study more about it since you were young, because it could have gone the other way. Like both of you could have been traumatized by it, Children often can't handle fear well, but both of you became very interested.
Yeah, I think we each had our own reactions to it. And then when we met much later in life, we kind of got introduced and we were both fascinated with film. And, Eric is a fantastic cinephile and very knowledgeable, and he encouraged me a lot in making films. And we kind of shared that common connection, right? And from then on, it's always been laughs and stories, right? There are a lot of stories, we hear stories, someone told different things. But also there's a real belief. I mean, we believe it, right? I mean, Eric is very superstitious, and every time I invite him to my place in Batam, he's like, "Which room am I staying in?" It's like, okay, you're not staying in the haunted one, you're staying...
Is it near the tree where there's the living spirit on top on people's heads?
So, I mean, we always have this connection where, when he comes to Batam and, I always make sure that he's okay, he's in the same spot.
Yeah, how do you make sure?
Yeah, I mean, there are some places that, because like Eric's very sensitive, right? And there are people who are sensitive, they can sense things, right? And there are people who are just totally switched off. They don't have that switch is off. They don't see anything, they don't feel anything, and it's okay. But there are places where I'd put people with the off or on switch, right? They might feel something or they might not. Singapore has developed so much over the years that you might not feel anything. It's kind of like...
Because Batam has such rural areas.
Yeah, it's very rural. you're in nature, you're by the sea, you're, right there, in the natural environment. So you're kind of more connected with what's there, and maybe what's there, what is it, right?
Because I was filming one episode for Folklore, this home box office anthology series, right? And we had like a special, like the Rain Man. Okay, so he's a bit like a Bomo, and he will stop the rain from coming, right? And we shot there, I think, 3.5 days. And seriously, a lot of it, 80%, was exterior shots. So with this Bomo, it's almost like you could see the thunderclouds coming, but they never came and it never rained. But literally on the last day, it just poured. It's like I could not control the rain anymore, right? But there was another interesting night when we were filming in this sort of forest area, and some of the crew were making jokes and all that, right? And then he came up to my producer and said, "Tell everyone, be mindful of what they're saying, because there are a lot of spirits here now and they are not happy."
Oh.
Okay, so everybody sort of like shut up a bit and behaved themselves. But the one who was making a lot of noise, one of the actors, he tripped and he knocked his head. And I tell you, I ran from my video system, to make sure he was okay, because he's wearing a wig, but luckily he was fine. Sometimes I think wherever you go, and we've done many productions. For example, when I produced Liang Popo, we shot in a strange area. That was very old. And at some point, the crew was saying there's something up there and, we'd better be careful. So it doesn't mean if you're doing horror or what, I think you've just got to be mindful wherever you are. And there's sort of respect. Because even the 81, right, which is a fun film, there were certain things that happened on the shoot that, pretty spooky.
Please tell us more.
I mean, we have a studio, we shoot in the studio a lot, and we shoot till very late, and you kind of lose track of time because everything's dark, and so there are moments where you feel that you're in there with not just the actors, or when there's a break, you're in the, ironically, it's like if it's a haunted house, you kind of feel that, okay, there's this other sort of like level of feeling that you get, right? Where it feels colder, it feels, you feel that someone else is there with you. But there are also other extreme situations where I remember when we were filming Half Worlds, and because we were filming at night all the time and people were tired, but everyone was getting possessed, right? Yeah, so they were getting possessed, and we were doing another production with an Australian co-production next door in another soundstage. So when they were coming out to have a cigarette break, there were people on the floor like convulsing. And and the sort of like the dukun had to go over and pray to exorcise the spirits out. They would be shaking on the floor, and these Australian crew were coming out, and they were having their cigarette and going, "Mike, do we look? Do we look? Do we not look? What do we do? Is this normal? Is this normal? How come? I mean, like, is it going to happen to us?" It's like, dude, it's okay. It's kind of part of the culture. So it's like it's kind of like infection. It can be infectious, meaning from a psychological standpoint, right? So, or it can be something that really is there, right? But, so we had the Australian crew that weren't really that affected, but then you had our crew, which was like everyone every other day was getting possessed, right?
You make it that's so casual.
Yeah.
It is because we deal with it, and it's like there, but it's part of life, right? And it's just like when you explain to someone from the outside, it's like, is this normal? I say, yeah, it's normal because we see a lot, right? And, so when you get possessed and when you see stuff, but, coming from Indonesia, you see a lot of weird stuff as well. Like, I mean, I've been to an exorcism. I've been to a place where this guy was so sick and the doctors didn't know what it was, and then went to a witch doctor, and he pulled out this piece of metal from his throat, and someone had cursed him because he'd done something wrong and whatever. I saw that with my own eyes and thought, is this magic? Is this tricks? It's not, right? Is it real? But everyone believes it and made me believe it. And this is the environment where when we make movies and cinema, and the environment, like what we make, the content is so easily consumed and loved, right? And appreciated and believed, right? And so this is where we come from, this environment.
I can't digest it when Mike says that, like, oh, being possessed is just part of the culture, part of your life. Like, what? It's so casual.
So, Mike, we know you have a new film called OrangIkan. It's mixed with wartime history and folklore horror. So, I just want to ask, how did you come up with the idea of having a fish-like creature, and why do you want to build a story around it?
So actually, this story came from Eric first, right? I mean, the OrangIkan, since we're big fans of Malay folklore, right? So OrangIkan, Orang Minya, it's like this Malay folklore that actually, again, goes back to these universal sort of thematic creatures that actually resonate around the world, right? Creature from the Black Lagoon, that was like in the 50s made in the United States. So this fishman creature, you see it pop up in pop culture, in film, all over the world, Europe, and then in Asia. Then you combine it with sightings with more like in World War II, there was a Japanese patrol and they sighted this sort of fishman creature in Indonesia. So all these stories. And so I guess what happened was that Eric was developing this project, came over and said, look, Mike, I've got this concept, how about, it's in Indonesia or whatever. You know what, when you write something, put it together. So I found it very fascinating. This happens in Indonesia and it's linked to the folklore. And the fishman creature is sort of like universal as well, universally understood. So we put this project together, I wrote it and worked with Eric in developing it. And that's where we had that concept, right?
Yeah, but mixing war and the myth together, right? It's actually really intense. Do you have any strange experience on set while filming?
Not this one, no.
This one, not so, because I think it was, we filmed, obviously the show takes place a lot on this island. So we actually went on location. There was some, yes, actually, when we had the fire and all that, right? That
waterfall.
Yes, the waterfall. There was.
Explain the waterfall. Yeah.
Yeah. So so every place where we go when we film, we pray, right? And we pray, and certain places have rules, right? So don't film after midnight because it's just too disruptive for the environment, the peace, and the spirits. And so this place had a rule where this waterfall is a beautiful waterfall and it was a mountain waterfall and it was a very spiritual place. People will go to it and pray. So these guys said to us, look, just stop filming at 11 and resume at 12, right? But between 11 and 12, do not film, all right? So we were doing that every night, just like 10:55, 50, we would stop. But it was like one of the last nights where we needed to just push on, but then we kind of at 10:58, we stopped. But then what happened was someone wanted to test the flare gun, and there was a flare gun that had to be shot into the air and to see how it looked like so we could film it and then it would land in a very safe area. So he shot it at 10, it was like 10:59 or something really close to 11. And that flare went up and it split. And it went back into the jungle, into the mountain behind us, behind the waterfall, and it was dry and it landed. We considered it, but then it faded. Then we thought, oh, okay, we're very lucky, it's 11 o'clock, okay, everyone stopped working, so we stopped. At 11:05, 11:10, a fire started, right?
Oh my God.
And this was a national park, right? And so then the fire started to spread. Then the fire was spreading everywhere. Everything was just a flame. It was just this huge flame. And then all of us just went up there into the hill, into the mountain. We just started trying to put out the fire. So in the end, we spent the whole night and luckily we put out the fire. I thought I'd end up in jail that night since it's a national park. There I was burning down the national forest. I have to call Eric the next day from jail. He's like, oh, please bail me out or something like that. But you know what? It's like people say that you kind of push the edge, right? You didn't respect.
Because you are not supposed to.
You are not supposed to push. When people say to you, just give the place some respect, I just stop filming at 11 and don't mess around, right? And our intention was never the best, right? And I think it was just some of the guys who said, like, just
Try.
let's just try. It'll be okay. When you do that, it's kind of like nature. And the spirits have its own way, has its own way to say, don't mess with us, right? This is what happens, right? And so that's it. I mean, we were very lucky to get away with things like that. And then, But every production has its challenges, right? I mean, we had our challenges here. Of course, OrangIkan, there were certain moments that were quite scary. And, you know, and you asked about why World War II. And I think World War II, there were so many tragic circumstances in World War II. It was a period of time where humanity was really tested. And this story is about, at the end of the day, the irony is that who really are the monsters? Are the monsters, are the creatures that we encounter that have been living there for thousands of years haven't really disturbed mankind, but is mankind the monster? You know, that's the kind of question that we ask in the film. And the background of World War II was sort of like an apt, kind of background to showcase this, to symbolize this. Yeah.
Yes.
I want to ask both Eric and Mike, do you have a local or regional horror film that really impressed you? Since we're on the topic of films, or maybe even some movies that made you think, I wish I had told that story instead.
Local.
Regional or local horror films?
Bro, what do you think?
I feel like in Asia, right, we tell some of the best paranormal films, right? But if you look at, I think in recent history, what was really big and important was The Ring and Dark Water.
Yes.
Right? The Japanese have made excellent supernatural films, especially in the 60s.
Yeah.
And then they went on this whole spree of making slasher films and all, right? And I think the government was getting quite concerned because there were serial killers trying to imitate these really gory films. So the Japanese took a step back and decided to go back to really simple supernatural paranormal horror films. And so there was a slew of films like Dark Water, The Grudge, and all these movies showed Asia or Southeast Asia that it was possible to make these paranormal films for very little money.
Yeah.
And it inspired filmmakers from Thailand to make Shutter. And if you look at Southeast Asia now, I'd say one of the countries coming out with the best horror is Indonesia. Because, as you say, right, it's really like a way of life. There's that respect for the other side, right? If you ask a Thai filmmaker if they believe in ghosts, they'll respond, do I believe in the white arts or the dark arts? It's a given, all right? I mean, you go to places like certain places in Thailand and you do feel something, right? And they really worship like the four-faced Buddha. I mean, Bali also has its own sort of vibe, right?
Yes.
So actually, a lot of the cinema, I mean, okay, I grew up on things like The Exhausts, the Western horror, yeah. But now I think the really exciting horror is the South American ghost stuff, Spanish and Asia.
Oh, Spanish?
Spanish. They come out with some of the best supernatural films. There's one called The Orphanage, and it's about a little sort of school for children, but there are hauntings. I think these kinds of films, right? The beautiful thing also is they're all small budget. That's why they call them B films or what, right? But I think the director of such films, he really has to think out of the box. And like the film Evil Dead, that was directed by Sam Raimi, who was only 22 years old. At the time, there was no such thing as a Steadicam, so he took a coffee table, sort of two legs, put it together on his waist with a belt, popped the 35mm camera on it, sped it up, and he walked down the hill.
Yeah.
And you've got this incredible velocity shot, right? So these guys are really, very inventive, very creative, and they go on to do bigger films. I mean, whether it's going to be a James Gunn or, and I think for me, if we were to carry on in the industry, especially coming from this part of the world, the supernatural stuff, is very valid.
Yes.
I mean, even look at directors like James Wan, right? He made Insidious on a $1 million budget and it grossed $90 million.
Yeah.
So the ratio of the returns.
That's really scary, Insidious.
Yes, yes.
I was scared. I love it. I love horror films, but I'm scared.
So when you look at The Sixth Sense, also, right, there's not much effects, but it's just in the storytelling, right? And the angles and sound design.
What about you, Mike?
No, same thing. I think, I grew up on a whole diet of, your poltergeist, and then also the creature movies like The Thing and The Fly. It's like those films, kind of like with zombie films, with creature films. They scare for a moment, but they don't linger. You don't kind of can't sleep because that, of course, for that moment, they're exhilarating. There's a different kind of, genre, right, compared to what we're talking about, like I think one of the films like The Ring, you're kind of thinking about it.
It gets in your
Yeah, it gets in your head, right? And I think it's a certain filmmaker, a certain skill set that one needs to have to be able to psychologically affect someone else, right? I mean, you could bombard anyone with visceral images of killing and slashing and, makeup and effects. I mean, that's one thing, right? But also to make something very simple and to make someone really terrified psychologically of something very simple so that you go home at night, you're alone and you're about to watch television and you think, what happened? Will that happen to me, right? And then you just can't sleep and it's just bugging you. That is a skill, right? And I think, to be able to do that is a feat, right? As filmmakers, achieving that would be ideal.
So, we can see a lot of like slasher films, and gory films just for the sake of gore. And it's like tenfold. How much more can you push it, right? But really, the special supernatural ghost films, not that many.
No.
But when they can do it, it's skill.
Yes, skill, it's skill.
For example, after watching the film, you don't dare take the elevator or stairs alone, sleep with the lights off, or shower with your eyes closed.
Yeah.
Those kinds of moments that really freak people out.
I think that's the best effect we could get. Someone like years later coming back to you and saying, I watched that scene you did, and it's still, you get very proud of that, right? But I think that's a different kind of skill than getting a whole bunch of zombies in a room and having them attack someone. And then you get it. It's entertaining, right? But you forget about it after a while, right?
So, looking forward, is there a myth, a setting, or a kind of horror story that both of you feel Singapore hasn't fully explored yet, but really should?
He's telling me about one of his latest productions.
Oh, yes. Yes. So it's something that we're doing in Indonesia. Indonesia is doing so many horror films, and it's very much based on the indigenous folklores, right? Like the Toyo, Kontiana, Pochang, all that. But we're doing something a bit different because there's a huge Chinese diaspora in Indonesia. And the Chinese diaspora, whether you're in Surabaya or Jakarta, they celebrate Chinese, the Ghost Month, right?
Yeah.
And so, we have this project which is really about an empty house, right? And it's called Empty House. But it's about a story that this girl gets hired by a family to take care of her grandmother who's ailing, and she takes care of this grandmother. She's there every day, she takes care of her, she hears stories of the old days, and she would really have this relationship with her. But then she begins to start seeing things in the house. And is it because the grandmother is telling her stories of her past, a tragedy, that she begins to see something? And then in the end, she becomes really wrapped up in this grandmother's life and she really cares for her. But then something's off with it. One day she returns to find the house empty and discovers what happened to grandmother. Everyone's like, she's never been there, she's dead all this time, right? So it's like, there's the story, like where the premise is very simple. The idea is actually very simple, right? So how do you feel that tension? How do you create things that lead you to believe and see and feel, right? But the premise is very simple, right? There's that, and it's probably something that there's towards the end of the year that we're doing that in Indonesia, right?
That's in Indonesia.
Yes.
Again, it works nicely because it's like a haunted house story.
Yes, it's a haunted house.
And it can be contained, and then it's really in the scripting.
That's right. I mean, it's very different I've been doing this series like Lost Man Melati, which is like the Indonesian Bates Motel. You check in, you don't check out, and then, people come to the inn with troubles, right? Your worst nightmares manifest themselves, whether you are feeling guilty about something, you're scared about something, it manifests and it appears in front of you and it kills you. So I've been working on that, but it is very more like what you talked about. It's like creatures. It's there are creepy moments, and I just finished the last one, which is more action slasher. But I'm just looking forward to going into something that is more sort of like still creepy, thoughtful. You just want to get a suspense. And I think that those are the exciting ones.
And that's still like what you really like to do.
I think it's where I'm most comfortable. I mean, if you ask me to do a comedy, I'll be like, action and thriller, and that's what I love, right? As filmmakers, we try to get out of our comfort zone and try something new, but we always get scared, right? It's like, are we, is this out of our comfort zone? Can we tell the story in that genre and make people entertained and tell that story? So yeah, I think we need to push ourselves all the time and find something new, right?
Okay, before we wrap up with you, right, do you have anything to share with the audience? Like, is there anything supernatural that actually creeps you out till today that happened to you?
It can be from your childhood, or like maybe when you guys are filming, directing a movie.
Well, on the beach near my house, there's a path that goes into the forest that we have to pass to go up to some housing. There's this tree that basically next to the tree is we built a little house for a spirit that basically lives in that part of this rocky outcrop. If it's not happy, it tends to roam, and so every time I pass, I never really believed, but I would see that little house. It's like this mini house made out of wood, and it's rotting in the corner. We'd make some offerings, but after a while we'd forget about it, So I would walk by all the time at night, and then I remember walking by, and then everything stopped still. It was like I was in a bubble. I couldn't hear anything. I couldn't hear the sea. I couldn't hear the leaves or branches rustling. I looked up, and there was a figure in the tree, sitting in the tree, looking down at me. But you just see this dark shape, and sand started falling down on me, right? Just sand, like just fine sand. And you could hear the sand falling. But you could feel this coldness as well. And this figure just sitting up, and this menace, this awful feeling that this thing had over me. Then after a moment, it was gone. And then every time I walked by that tree, there was this sort of weird feeling. And then I would tell my team, my staff, please fix the house, please put the offerings back, And then we tend to see less of him.
Do you still remember how the sand felt and everything? Was it very real?
Yes, it was like slow-mo, your time.
Oh my.
And then you're like in this void, and you look up, and there's someone looking at you. You can't even see the face. But you could feel this darkness, and then the sand dropping down on you, and then it was very strange.
Do you really have a third eye?
I don't think I have a third eye. I don't even have a sense. Actually, I've been told that I don't have a sense at all.
But you've seen the figure on the tree.
But if I could see the figure, then it must be quite strong, right? Yeah, so I that's why people tell me if you could see it, then that thing is real. And that's why I had to rebuild the small little house. Yeah.
What about you, Eric? Do you have any?
Not like that. But that whole thing where you sort of like feel paralyzed when you're about to sleep. They call it like quieter, That happened to me when I was a teenager, and it was really frightening because I remember I woke up in the middle of the night and I just couldn't move. And I was looking at the poster in front of me, which was a James Dean poster. And then I started hearing this growling of an animal behind me. And at that point, I was just really petrified. I kept praying, God, get me out of this and I'll be good, I'll be nice. And, after it felt like hours, but probably just seconds, then I got out of it. But at that point in time, I was actually reading a lot of books on astral projection. That's when, you can get your spirit out. And I was dabbling a bit with the occult lies and reading and playing with the Ouija board and things like that. But I do feel that sometimes also when your psyche is low,
Yes.
then you are more susceptible.
Yeah, more tend to.
And that was pretty scary at that one time. But like I say, I've been to like old locations, different locations. Sometimes when you film, you must tread carefully and always respect that space, because there's energy everywhere.
Yeah.
But there was a certain series I was producing as well, also a ghost series. And in one of the episodes, there was this actress we had who was very superstitious. So she goes, please, give me a foo, like an amulet to protect her. So we got it, she wore it, and very sadly, after she shot her episode, right? She was just having all these sort of mishaps. She would trip, she would fall, and everything was really bad. So finally, someone had to go to the temple to check, what had happened, right? And it appeared that there was a date and a time that she offended something, and it was the day they shot her in the morgue area. And the metal sort of thingy. There was a dead body there before her, and then when she lay on it, that spirit followed her.
Oh my goodness.
And so what we had to do then was to pray so that the thing would leave. I mean, it's quite scary in the sense because the date and timing all matched when she had to film in the casket place, yeah.
Wait, but no one was aware that previously there was a...
I think they assumed no one was there even though something was a few hours earlier. You see, awesome.
Oh, this is super creepy.
So when you hear all this, then it is not okay timing-wise, and it's...
In Chinese, it's 天时地利人和. Everything aligns.
It all matches.
Oh my gosh, so unlucky.
Poor thing, she had a foo, but it didn't protect her. Later, after we said goodbye and you burned the papers, she was fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have heard many different interesting stories from both Eric and Mike. So we would like to thank you guys for making time to come and chit chat and share stories with us.
Thank you so much for hosting us. It's been a real pleasure. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And to our listeners, our legendary guests, they've mentioned a few films.
Different films.
Go ahead and catch them. Those are really interesting. Okay? And one last thing, all right? Remember to catch local horror films as well. Support local, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching Holly Grounds. Remember to subscribe and turn on, okay.
Why would you also?
And turn on your notification bell. Bye.